we talk about trends affecting the future of work or are the future of work. Today we're talking about how has the pandemic affected hiring across industries, and we have with us Rituparna Chakraborty, who is an accomplished business leader with 21 years of experience, and she's also the co-founder and EVP of Teamlease. We all know what Teamlease is. It is India's largest people supply chain company. Ritu, give me one more minute for your introduction before I welcome you. Ritu is the only person from Asia to be included in the Global Power 100 and also International 50 Women in Staffing. And she is the winner of the Telstra Businesswoman Award Businesswoman in Asia Award. She's driven by Team Lee's vision of putting India to work. I love that vision. And also the fact that she always says, not sure, I love this too, not sure whether we can all solve India's job problems, but we can surely die trying. I think Zoom Out is one attempt to die trying, to bring them out also and talk about them in the open. So Ritu, Parna, thank you so much. May I please call you Ritu through the show?
Please.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor for me actually to be having this conversation with you today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Good to be part of your first chat cast. Is that what it is? Right?
Yes.
So, yeah, it's wonderful. So great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Yes, let's start.
Let's start.
Whatever.
Awesome. So, like we said, we spoke about the theme of this episode. It is how has the pandemic affected hiring across industries? So, I think the most obvious thing to ask you right now, Ritu, is that what are the hiring trends you've seen, during the last 18 months? What has been disrupted? What is poised to be disrupted? I know, three-part question, but can we talk about it?
Sure. The good thing about this pandemic is that we don't know whether we are at the beginning or the middle or the end. We have, given the number of waves that are being predicted. But I guess in spite of it, with each wave, I guess there has been newer learnings, maybe slightly better preparedness. The second wave obviously has been heartbreaking at many levels. It may not have affected the economy as much as it affected us as a society. But nonetheless, I think India is a country which is, finally we have to accept, India is a poor country, and there are millions of people who live in precarious conditions. More than 90% of the workforce is in informal work, and it have access to very little dignity of work. And hence, not just a job, having a formal job is pretty much the need of the hour, and now more than ever before. So I think just to answer your specific question, I think gone are the times when employers would see 100 applications for the same job postings. Now that number would have quadrupled. It's no doubt that the current COVID-induced dynamic job market has changed. But some of the basic talent acquisition gains obviously remain the same, like search for top talent. I think today's employers look for skilled workforce and skilled incumbents. So according to Teamlease research, I mean, we do this like every quarter. We do a plethora of annual reports, which have been around probably for the last 15, 16 years, if not more. So, but then there is this one report which comes out every quarter called the Employee Outlook Report. And according to that, intent to hire for the second quarter this year is at 38%, which is an increase of almost 4% from the previous quarter. And it was anticipated and expected, and probably were part of our wishful thinkings as well. So some of the hiring trends to be noted are that the intent to hire junior level is almost at 32%, entry level at 28%, senior level 26%, and even mid-level, it has gone up by about 22%, indicating the second quarter to be dominated largely by bulk hiring, Our losses have also been at that same level in the past, over the last 17 months, so which all goes well. As a matter of fact, there is a fight, a literal talent war that is going on out there, and clearly anybody is who's willing to offer more for those who would leave and take those and take those opportunities. So when I say talent, war for talent, essentially, it's an interesting thing. You might say that there are these people who have lost their jobs, their demand may not have picked up at the same level. I think the inequality between the skill, the location, and where the demand arises continues to exist even through the pandemic, which means that there are a lot of cities in the country where most of the jobs are again coming back and reviving. We're dependent on large number of migrant workers at all levels. But that population has shrunk dramatically, and that has led to this war that I'm indicating. I think another trend in the job market is women hiring, which is expected to see an uptick with sectors like healthcare and pharmaceuticals, e-commerce and technology startups scaling up their women workforce participation. It's almost like an important inclusion agenda across companies. Also down south, many states are actually trying to incentivize employers to create more employment for women employees. As a matter of fact, if you read today's Mint, the long story, which was published by Gautam Das, I think he's indicating the same. Skilled patient attendants, caregivers, nursing, and women delivery partners are among the top job roles that employers are looking to hire. I mean, what is getting disrupted or getting sidelined are the jobs with the highest physical proximity, such as personal care services, on-site customer interaction, custom classroom training, and of course, the sudden boom on the need and demand for digitally attuned workforce, which means any job where you have a high and a surge in digital skills, there is definitely a huge demand. I mean, even in job roles where earlier the proportion of digital were not all that high, suddenly there is a huge demand. I mean, whether it's teachers who are attuned to digital environment, whether it's in marketing, I think we are seeing that trend quite a bit. I mean, these were not so obvious or not so prominent before the pandemic, but right now they are the center of all eyes. So yeah, I don't know whether that answers your question, but that's what pretty much is happening around.
Oh, it does, and it's excellent to hear, a lot of good things and a few things that, I have follow-ups for. But I think it brings us very nicely to the second question, right? About how are various key industries managing demand, and, because there's a sudden creation of a new variety of jobs as well. So what's happening to the supply? Although you did mention that the applications have quadrupled, if you can just explain this bit to us a little bit, and if we can delve into a few key industries and how are they managing demand and supply, it'll be interesting to hear it.
Sure. So I think it probably is obvious. I don't think we need a survey, though we have an employment outlook survey, which is talking about the surge in demand on the usual suspects, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, e-commerce, educational services, and information technology. I think it's but obvious. So we are seeing that there is a surge in demand across, I mean, significant surge in demand across all these sectors. But also what we are noticing is that the laggards, which have been laggards for the last 17 months, which is hospitality, which is probably aviation, lifestyle retail, tourism, I think there is even if it's a very slight and modest improvement, there is an improvement even in their hiring outlook. And if the question is whether it's comparable to the pre-pandemic days, no, clearly not. But the fact that if you're just comparing with the last previous few quarters, there seems to be an obvious increase in intent and demand. And it's been my belief that if the second wave would not have hit us, we would have seen this far more prominently. I think organizations were very well geared. Organizations were eager to kind of tap into the opening up and the resurgence. They wanted to hire, but I guess due to the April, May, June hit of the pandemic really took everyone by surprise. From those actualizing of some of those plans perspective. Obviously, they were not as ill prepared as the first wave. I think they were much better prepared. I think their ability to adapt to the remote working, the securities and productivity and managing teams engagement. I think corporate India did very well across all those fronts. But I think as a society, we definitely got crippled, and that led to significant amount of on-ground panic and fear. I think that panic and fear was much, much more than what we probably have witnessed prior to that. And that has definitely put a little bit of a roadblock towards getting workforce back, right? So, and I think a large number of frontline job roles today across the country do need migrant workers. And India has a clear economic divide, whether we like it or not. Most of the economic prosperity and GDP contribution happens from the southern states and probably a part of West India. And most of the availability of manpower is in the northern part of India, probably eastern part of India. So essentially, the north and the east has been exporting their manpower to these other states. But because of this pandemic, something has happened which we haven't seen in the past, and which is this fear psychosis of trying to come back. The fact that there are challenges of boarding, local boarding, there are challenges on transportation, I think has been a little bit of a dampener. I think that the industry's maximum hit because of that will be e-commerce. A lot of the domestic consumption driven companies have been hit because of that. Manufacturing has been hit because of that. So I guess this is now going to be a little bit of a chicken and the egg situation for a while, but I'm assuming that from September onwards, because organizations are gearing up for the season, for the festive seasons, and they would like to, even if there is a window between the second wave and the third wave where individuals would be interested in kind of coming out and spending, and organizations don't want to lose out on that opportunity. So I suspect that by September, there will be some kind of a normalization between demand and supply, the tension that currently exists. And that will augur well for actual jobs getting created and getting added. And we'll see after that what happens. Of course, corporate India also have been on the edge in terms of the different kinds of employment models that they would like to try to ensure that they have a win-win proposition. But we'll have to see how that kind of works out.
Understood. And it's interesting also from a worker's point of view in that case, then what are some of the learning opportunities do you think that, are slowly gaining more prominence considering a lot of these changes? And, according to you, what are some of the skill sets that industries are really encouraging today?
Look, I think there are obviously functional skill sets which are becoming very important. But I think in today's world of work, machines will perform tasks they are better suited to perform than humans, such as computation, data analysis, and logic. And you cannot keep, by the way, corporates, no matter what, to kind of veer towards such machines, if that makes logical sense and if it's affordable. Whereas functions requiring emotional intelligence, empathy, compassion, creative judgment, and discernment will expand and be increasingly valued in our human culture. Tinkering, invention, problem solving, entrepreneurship, and leading change must be emphasized. And not just acquiring vocational skills and landing a job. I think if people have to build resilience to their career, and this includes everyone, and this is not something for its particular level. I feel we live in a world where accidents can happen at any point of time. And hence, as individuals, we are obligated not to look up to any institution, employer, government to kind of fend for ourselves and pave the way for our sustainability. I think the most important thing we could do for ourselves, or rather the most important systematic investment plan that we can commit ourselves to, is actually uh, fine tuning, or rather kind of constantly brushing up our non-cognitive aspects, and of course learn new areas, learn new skills, just constantly be learning. So this will inevitably result in more economic dynamism, more entrepreneurship, and obviously more jobs. Work is moving rapidly away from fixed jobs. I mean, that's what probably I was alluding to even in your previous questions, both from individual requirements and needs as well as employers, towards gigs, projects, freelancing. Careers will look less like tunnels from which you emerge 30 years later, and more like navigating a maze requiring more of us to see ourselves as freelancers and entrepreneurs. Also, many industries are now looking for skills to digitize and automate processes, and have generated a growing demand for professionals with specialized skills such as digital adoption, data analysis, AI know-how, and the automation plus delivery agents, warehouse managers on the delivery side, I guess. But all the skill sets that you're looking at out there, even if it's at the entry level or at the grassroots level, I think a digital skill set is a given. It's a no-brainer. And of course, in financial services, for example, some of the skills which are in demand is digital banking, blockchain. Of course, these are higher end stuff, but there is a greater demand. And some of these things that I'm just these fancy keywords that get spoken about quite often, like AI, machine learning, cloud computing, cybersecurity, robotic process automation. These are things which are not anymore prerogative of so-called tech companies. Like for any company to survive and grow, these are operating systems. And hence, there is an anticipated demand for all these skills. And hence, it augurs well for individuals to kind of constantly be reskilling themselves and adding on to some of these. I am of the opinion that you don't need to be an engineer or a tech genius to kind of pick up some of these stuff. I think you can be anyone in any professions. But the fact that you're aware and getting yourself acquainted to some of these is absolutely essential.
I was thinking of that too, right? It's not about, engineers anymore. It's about how we are engineering our life, and to some extent, I'm going to take a little bit of a segue. I do have a question for you on technology, and, I mean, it's that quintessential questions. I do not want to follow it up with this bit right now. So we'll change paths a little bit. So, the one thing I have been reading about though, Ritu, is that there is actually somewhat of a gap in demand and supply of workforce, right? On one hand, some industries are talking about lesser demand, and some industries are seeing lesser supply. So, can you just elaborate a little bit on what is really happening? Because I think that media reports, sometimes are really positive, sometimes are really negative. So what's really happening out there? If you can throw some light on this, please.
I don't think demand and supply ever met, even before the pandemic. And that deficit is not really a problem. It's probably a disappointment, but it's not really a problem. So I think it's actually a much better outcome when there is a gap between demand and supply. But as long as the gap is on account of demand being more than supply, India has a wicked problem. India has a wicked problem where in some areas demand is far more than supply, and in many others there is supply in excess of demand. So I think we've got it. Can be a region. If you do a regional split, it will become obvious to you. If you do an industrial specific split, it will become obvious to you. If you do skill-based, obviously it's going to be quite apparent. So anyway, given the pace at which technology and skills are transforming, the current knowledge of skill sets are becoming redundant and out of date. And I don't think I'm saying something extraordinary. I think it's quite known. As Peter Drucker rightfully said, the only skill that will be important in the 21st century is the skill of learning new skills. Everything else will become obsolete over time. And in one of our research, it actually shows that in healthcare, IT, pharma, educational services, e-commerce, tech startups, in all of these sectors, they're extremely fast-paced. Change is happening at an unbelievable speed. And if you see the newspapers, I think it's quite evident. And there is a high demand for skilled workforce in these sectors. I mean, we are seeing how many unicorns are emerging. Like through the pandemic, you know how many unicorns emerged in this country, huge valuations, a lot of money is getting pumped in, and all of these are essentially with a view to kind of scaling up these businesses. And one of the consequences of all of that is going to be need for a lot of skilled workforce. So information technology, as a matter of fact, is among the top paymasters. On the contrary, the demand for workforce. And why is it that they're the top paymasters? Clearly because at this point of time, the demand that they have for specific skill set pretty much outnumbers the availability of such skill sets in the country. And I think, again, every day in the newspapers, we are hearing about some, I call them ridiculous methods that some of these employees in some of these tech companies, they are resorting to attract talent and retain talents. Like, even if you have not performed to your goals, you'll get 100% of your variable plays, fancy spiffs and bonuses, holidays, vacations, I don't know what else. On the contrary, the demand for workforce in sectors like consulting, travel and hospitality, construction and real estate, retail, lifestyle, or non-essential, they remain sluggish or staggered or very muted. Employers in many sectors are betting big on innovation and making smart investments in newfound job roles that will stand them in good stead in the near and not so near future. But these are all on higher ends, which means that as organizations innovate, and which everyone will, we have to accept the fact that the supply will not keep pace with them. However, at some point, supply will try to catch up, and that's the tipping point when you will see better quality jobs with higher wages will start emerging in a country like India. Technology startups are seen to be occupying right now the center stage and the front row seats of whatever the spectacle that is going on around innovation. Also, we are entering a phase where there is a global shortage of tech talent. The digital skill gap is already hampering digital transformation, and the gap is widening. So I think there is, according to a NASSCOM report, demand is increasing rapidly for emerging technologies like big data analytics, cyber security, IoT, AI, ML, and the works. And in order to position India as the talent hub for the new emerging technologies and businesses, I think there has to be a concerted effort between the government, between the industries, between the different via media, the tech sector skill councils, to kind of come out with a roadmap to be able to cater to this demand. Otherwise, what's going to happen is that the demand doesn't wait for anyone. Demand will never wait for supply to catch up. Demand will go where supply is available. And that would be a huge loss for this country and for the youth of the country. And I hope that never happens, actually.
True. Wow, that's a lot to kind of you know internalize as well. But I'm going to come back to this because you did speak about AI, ML, and the works. So can we talk about this a little bit, like now and in the future, right? How, I mean, really, this is a quintessential question, but I think it's important to keep asking this question. How do we maintain the balance between technology and the human force? the human workforce, considering we're already talking about supply issues when it comes to these technologies as well.
Okay, so bear with me and give me some time, because this is a big question, and this is uh, so it's going to take me a while to put things in perspective. So bear with me on this. So the industry 4.0 principles are long-term evolutionary processes which have been accelerated with the pandemic. As a matter of, that's what happened. Industry 4.0 used to be a much talked about topic in every conference around future of work before the pandemic, and suddenly we saw this fast forwarded. And the need for tech disruptions appear to be glaring at us with earnest eyes. Everybody's being taken by surprise. Automation and analytics are on steroids for all industries to transform their own competitive landscape, and the need for future resource investment in aligning people, technology, and processes inherent. Let's look at this. Like the chicken and the egg problem, there is no definitive answer, and all businesses need to kind of coexist. Likewise, it is only natural that the technology and the human workforce coexist for better outcomes for the economy at large. And I like to make a case that when the two of them are not in conflict, the two of them, it may seemingly so, there could be a lag effect. But in the end of the day, technology exists for better outcomes, by the way, for human workforce. So we are at the cusp of the new age automation for businesses, making it a workplace reality to know the impact on employment and productivity. So again, we do this annual exercise of a Teamlease jobs and salary primer report, the latest one, which is the 2021. All industries in the progression of 6 to 8% growth, like BFSI, tech startups, ITITS, healthcare, pharma, power and energy, telecom, are transitioning to tech-based or influenced roles and not replacing them altogether. The increasing use of software, connectivity, analytics has increased the intent to hire by 39% of digital embedded skills. Any individual performs a variety of tasks, and only a part of it can be fully automated, driving scope for growth. Now, this is not limited to the blue-collared workforce, but extends to all types from bottom to the top level employees. These principles will aim at creating new types of work, and people need to upgrade to stay relevant. It's the most often repeated thing. I don't know how many times I repeat it myself with my own teams. The nature of skill needs an upgrade to maintain balance, but we are still intertwined with the human workforce to drive the technology and vice versa. A very simple example in this context to give perspective: because of the pandemic today, we all order from e-commerce websites instead of going to a retail store. Like my parents, and I'm sure many of yours, who've never ever thought of buying anything other than that nearby grocery shop or that known kaprawala or that tailor, I guess even they have been forced to change their behavior. I mean, which has led to fewer people in store, but more delivery person to get commodities from location A to B, which means while we lost certain jobs of retail attendants in these retail shops, but suddenly there has been an increase in demand for people, personals who are required for delivery or to man warehouses, and that's been enabled through technology. Now, this is a transition that technology is bringing about. With the upcoming festive season, as per the employment outlook report of this quarter, the intent to hire is at 53% for e-commerce and tech startups. Listed unicorns are ramping up their hiring, even though they strongly bank on automated processes. For this purpose, even the hiring and management of this human workforce has to be tech-enabled. So at Teamlease, currently we're working on something we call the digital workforce solution. Now, many of these, starting from pre-hire, screening, interviewing, onboarding, attendance management, expense management, monitoring the supervision, performance management, everything there we had digital solutions and modules. Interestingly, before the pandemic, the usage or the adoption was about 45%. Come the pandemic, it has shot up to almost 96, 99%. Now, it has enabled organizations to kind of come out with a solution in spite of the pandemic. So right now, today, while things are much better, we are still being able to utilize the upsides of some of those realizations and the changes that have happened. And how does it help? Organizations are able to get onboarding done faster. They're able to get people live through training, online training, onto the job faster. Finally, all of these translates into revenue gains and productivity gains all around. Human capital is undergoing a paradigm shift with emerging technologies that divide the classic work task in support of global and digital production, allowing the generation of new employment models. I mean, we're talking about gig, freelance, and all of this, by the way. Like, if you've seen what has happened, how the entire employment market has been transformed, especially those who are in the informal sector, because of the Olas, the Ubers, the Swiggies, the Zomatos of the world. At some level, it has created new employment opportunities, but it has also managed to optimize some of the other supply chain costs that were involved earlier. So I think Industry 4.0 architecture is still taking shape, continuously evolving, learning, and reeling from the pandemic wounds to synergize growth and scale with digital transformation in human capital development. But whatever it is, we feel that we're in the right direction. Even if there were unprepared shocks, I think we have responded well and we are learning to adapt. The future, which was supposed to have been the future, is already present amongst us. So I don't think we right now have time to debate whether we are choosing technology over human workforce or vice versa. I think it's already coexisting. It is quite self-evident right now.
True. Sometimes I always wonder why, like the future of work is such a misnomer. It's like the yesterday of work that we are catching up with. So, but then I can't, I mean, I really wish that I could hashtag yesterday of work instead of future of work, but people might disown me. So I go with the flow there. But okay, our last question, Ritu, for what has been such an insightful conversation. What are some of your favorite, or let's say, good examples of training and reskilling at a large scale? Because you talked about so many different use cases where corporates had to really change their entire, whether it was hiring strategy or whether it was what the job involved itself. So what are your favorite examples of training and reskilling or upskilling at scale? And this is, I don't know if it's a controversial question, but always been on my mind. um, uh, One other question here is, to what degree should regulatory agencies be involved, whether it is migratory work or whether it is gig work? Because you were talking that a lot of freelance work is going to happen. Even we as employees of large organizations are going to look somewhere like freelancers and entrepreneurs. So what kind of a regulatory agency should be involved, and what should its role be? I think it's very interesting a discussion to have.
So I think I'll answer your last question later, because the last question is in itself a standalone question. So I'll come to that. But to just give you examples of how change has driven large scale skilling of a particular, let's say, skill set or a particular job role. I think this entire process, the first thing that comes to my mind is obviously the BPO and the ITS sector. I think because of the research, and probably that happened almost 15, 20 years back, but because of the resurgence, as a matter of fact, two examples. I mean, how can I miss? One, of course, is the IT sector, and the second is the ITS BPO sector. I think these are some of the unique and mentionable large-scale skilling initiative, which was completely demand driven. And I'm not going to talk intentionally about any other stuff besides these two, which were orchestrated, through this things like uh, Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana and all of that. That's much more downstream. Why am I calling it out? I think these are classic examples of when there is a clear focus towards backing certain sectors, and then there is also an alignment between policymakers, between entrepreneurs, to kind of focus and create a center of excellence around some of in areas like this. You see what happened. So there was a time, maybe almost 20-25 years back, every engineer, first and foremost, every engineer wanted to be a mechanical engineer, and every engineer wanted to go and work for some of these large engineering companies or industrial companies. I mean, that was the aspiration. But we suddenly saw that shifting towards two things. The resurgence of engineering colleges across length and breadth of the country. I think where earlier there was a huge supply constraint of engineers. I think the entry gate for engineering students was brought down significantly. The IT industry started absorbing kids. And I remember that at that point of time, at the entry level, there were about the compensation for engineers were about 4 lakh those days. And that was a lot of money for young kids. And when those early successes were visible in society, everyone wanted their kids to become an engineer. They wanted them to become a computer engineer, and they wanted to kind of, and colleges responded. Colleges actually changed their final year or maybe the final 2 years curriculum to cater to the demands of the IT industry. And we saw what happened. I remember when the IT industry was nascent, the per annum availability of engineers were 4 lakhs, and within actually not 4-5 years, within probably 7-8 years, the demand became 4 times. The availability became 4 times. So, and we became the hotbed of high quality engineers, not just for the country, but for the entire world, right? The second, obviously, is the BPO and the ITS sector. Same thing happened. While work hours were different, but these were amazing jobs, great working environment, attractive for youth, great pay, and suddenly everyone wanted to write and speak good English, right? So, and we saw the impact it had in society all across the country. In every city, small towns, everybody wanted to work for a BPO or an ITS company. So either one set of people wanted to be engineers, those who didn't want to be engineers wanted to work in a BPO IT. And we saw how demand driven those skills that became available in the country. I think apprenticeship actually, if we were to look beyond these two sectors, apprenticeship program, which is tied at the hip with a MOOCs platform or an online digital learning platform, is the way to massify availability of skills. But for that, apprenticeship has to become attractive. We need to ensure that there is a good stipend, which actually helps them take care of their stay, their commute, and maybe get to save a little bit. If that happens, and if every industry start encouraging and opening up their doors to apprentices, if society starts giving apprentices the stature they deserve, just like it happens in Germany, in Austria, in China, in Japan, it will automatically create an ecosystem where a massive, large-scale skilling continuously happens without any intervention. So that's my take on how we can achieve large-scale skilling and some recent examples. On the second question, I think the good thing that has happened is that Government of India has acknowledged the fact that India needs alternative employment models, and we shouldn't discourage it. Every job, one should read the the direction of the wind very carefully. And it's very clear that nothing is permanent about this world. I think one thing that pandemic has taught us is there is nothing called permanent. Anything can change. And hence, even employers would not like to be burdened or get stuck with the possibility of having no revenues, but yet having to have maintained some of the fixed costs. And hence, a little bit of flexibility is important. So you will see gig work, freelancing, project-based, apprenticeship, a lot of models emerging, a lot of smart staffing solutions emerging. And hence, in the Social Security Code, in the OSH code, or rather the labor codes, which is itself a huge innovation by Government of India, trying to rationalize the plethora of almost 29 acts, central acts, labor under the labor laws into the 4 codes, itself is a huge innovation. And in that, gig has been acknowledged and has been adequately and appropriately defined. There are also mentions about how to provide a social security fund option for gig workers when they become vulnerable, and some of their basic entitlements. And I guess those are great moves. So wherein employers have the option, but also there is a semblance of protection for those who actually take up the challenge of these alternate form of employment. So we've made good progress, but it's still insufficient till the rules get notified and we get on with it. And it has also significant protection for migrant workers. The best protection for migrant workers is giving them local jobs. But till such time that happens, I guess the provisions of ensuring that the employers bear the cost of their both ways travel. There is a register which is being maintained. There is a grievance mechanism which is being put in place. There is an acknowledgement that they're working, moving from one state to another and stuff like that. I think those are also proper moves. But again, the rules need to get more notified for them to become implemented.
Wonderful. Thank you for this. I think, Ritu, I do know that the questions were quite varied, and you kind of have done full justice, I think, to each question, and each answer is like a master class, for somebody who's really intently listening. So thank you so very much for giving me this time. Really, I'm so privileged again to say that I've had you on the show, and I would love, depending on the response and feedback we receive, to probably do another one to continue to map where we're really headed, where jobs are concerned, and our little attempt, right, to continue to solve the problems and die trying. I know, horrible way to end, but I think we will.
No one's dying. We'll win this one. Don't worry.
No, we live trying, I think. So
thank you so much. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. See you, Nisha. Bye.
Bye bye.